Waiver wire for week 9 right now on FFT Express. We got 4 teams on a bye. We got Cleveland, Philadelphia, Tampa Bay, and the Jets on a bye. What's up, Jamie? How are you?
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. All right. What do we got here? Tyrone Tracy, empty the fab.
I don't know if you want to empty the fab, but he's certainly somebody worth spending for because he's going to be a starting running back and hopefully can perform more like he did at the end of last year than what we've seen from him at the beginning part of this year. But obviously, there's a huge opportunity without Cam Scatterbo there, unfortunately, out for the season. So he's the number one player to go get. But it's a very weird week because we have the trade deadline looming next week. You have the 4 teams on a bye, and there's some players that are not playing this week that you might want to go at, like Justin Fields, potentially, the 2 tight ends for Cleveland, Mason Taylor, and then we have 2 injuries going into the bye that we don't know what's going to happen coming out of the bye. One, you seem to get an idea that Saquon Barkley is going to be fine, but it's certainly worth your interest to add Tank Bigsby. And then the big one would be Quinshon Judkins if he's going to be out, Dylan Sampson, and potentially Jerome Ford. So a lot of moving parts, I think, with this week's waiver wire.
Yeah, I think we could start with Tracy and just, you said you're not sure about emptying your fab because he hasn't been a very efficient running back lately. Do you think, I actually was just comparing him to Woody Marks at the end of Beyond the Box Score, and I said I'd rather have Tyrone Tracy Jr. than Woody Marks. Just to get a concept of what you're thinking about him rest of season, who would you rather have?
I think that's a fair assessment, just knowing that Mark still is going to share touches with Nick Chubb. If Chubb was not there and it was both guys getting the opportunities to be the starters on their team, I would probably go with Marks. But I guess we're still going to see Devin Singletary to some extent as well. So that's probably a little bit of an issue for Tracy. But he's in that low end number 2, high end flex range. Think about some of the guys that we've been talking about that have been getting work that just haven't been successful over the course of the season. Tony Pollard, Chase Brown. We've gone through situations where guys have been featured and getting touches. They just have not been successful. And I think that's kind of going to be the case with Tracy. But clearly Scatterbo was great. And, you hope that Tracy can do some similar things. Again, last season, I think it was like 13 or more PPR points in 3 of his last 6 outings to close 2024. I'll go back and have that for you on Tuesday's show for sure. So there's a path to success. It's just, how good can he be in terms of emptying your fab? This isn't like, for me, for example, if you told me Tank Bigsby was starting for the Eagles rest of season, I probably would be more interested in him.
Okay. Yeah, I think that what would save Tracy would be the passing game stuff because Jackson Dart's been throwing a Scatterbo a lot. Scatterbo's been running a ton of routes. What would hurt Tracy, I think, would be maybe he's just not that good of a running back. I would point out that they didn't have Andrew Thomas earlier this year, and they didn't have Andrew Thomas, I think, late last year either. I have to go back and check on that. And he's kind of the key to their whole offense. They just have a better offense now, but I don't know that he's going to be the goal line back. I think that's kind of up in the air. I would not be surprised if they use Devin Singletary in short yardage. Something to keep in mind. Which quarterbacks are we looking at for the waiver wire?
So you got Sam Darnold and Trevor Lawrence coming off a bye. I think both guys are worth looking at for this week and probably rest of season. Darnold, not the easiest of matchups against Washington, but he certainly played well and would be a low-end starter. Trevor Lawrence against the Raiders, great matchup. He's played well, so I think both those guys should be added. The third quarterback for me is right now Tua Tagovailoa, just based on what we saw from him against Atlanta. Hopefully that's a sign of things to come. But Justin Fields, if you don't need a quarterback for this week and you want to speculate moving forward, they could get Garrett Wilson coming back from their bye week. And as we've seen, good matchups, Justin Fields has been great, especially when Garrett Wilson's been on the field. So I would want to roster Justin Fields if you have a quarterback opening for this week.
He doesn't really have any good good matchups unless Cleveland stays really beat up because they did lose 3 starters yesterday. But it's Cleveland, New England, Baltimore, and Atlanta, I think. At least 3 of those are right. I'm not sure about that third game in there for Justin Fields. But look, he's got enticing upside, no question. All right, running backs, anyone we're missing other than you mentioned Tracy, you mentioned Bigsby. There's the Cleveland situation.
Anyone? He's still available in 46% of leagues. He gets Dallas this week. It's Donovan Knight. So the 1 week situation we talked about the last couple of weeks. So the way I have it ranked right now is Tracy 1, Knight 2, Spears 3, just because, again, there's a couple scenarios at play here. Tony Pollard potentially could get traded, but Spears getting more work. So I always like to put the guys that have a chance to play versus the guys that don't. But if you're looking ahead, Dylan Sampson, I'd probably move Sampson ahead of Spears, to be honest, just because it sounds like Judkins can miss some time. And then Bigsby. Isaiah Davis, look, he could be the starter for the Jets if they go into their bye week and decide this is the time to move Breece Hall if they get an overwhelming offer. Because if you're trying to acquire Breece Hall, you just saw what he did. and you don't have any risk of injury if he comes back next week and plays, right? Or practices.
Yeah.
Well, they won't play before the trade deadline, so I take that back. They won't play before the trade deadline. So um, you might see him moved. So Isaiah Davis should be rostered. Samaje Perine, look, he's getting work and just had a huge game. So somebody worth your interest. Devin Neal, I don't think Alvin Kamara gets moved, but he did get banged up a little bit in that game.
Yeah.
And then Emmanuel Wilson's definitely somebody should be rostered. He's just getting he's looked good every time he's got an opportunity behind Josh Jacobs.
All right, we're going to take a break. I'm going to tell you, we didn't say this name for good reason, but there's a quarterback I wanted to bring up that could be available in your leagues. I'll tell you about that when we come back on FFT Express. There's a quarterback that's 75% rostered in CBS Sports Leagues, but on Sleeper, on Yahoo, on ESPN, he's at 66% or less. He's in about the 60% range, I guess, aggregate. It's Brock Purdy. Hopefully Brock Purdy is back soon, and he's got great weapons. There's a lot to like about Brock Purdy. I can't imagine I'd want him to be available for my opponents to pick up. So think about adding Brock Purdy. All right. Wide receivers, Jamey.
Long list of names. So the guy I have at the top is Troy Franklin. We've seen, some positive production at times this year coming off a huge game. I know it was against Dallas, but these are the type of things that you can hope push a guy forward for the rest of the season. So I like Troy Franklin the best. Jameer Dike would be next. This is a weird one because what happens when Calvin Ridley comes back? If he does come back, he's another guy that could get traded, but you have to pick him up based on what he's shown you the last 2 weeks. I have Darius Slayton third. I think we feel a lot different about him if he gets that touchdown and the excitement level about what we said when Malik Neighbors was injured. Then he has the hamstring injury. We know he's going to be a big part of this Giants offense. Christian Watson, 4 catches, 85 yards. You know what his upside is. Certainly somebody you want to roster. I unfortunately, I don't know how you did this. We've had this conversation before about Tyjae Spears and Jalen Cook, or when these guys come off IR, you almost have to drop them unless you have an open roster spot. I had to do that with Watson, then just had to watch him play like that. And oh bleep, I probably won't get him back now. Josh Downs, remember, was building a lot of momentum, had the concussion, missed the game, comes back, scores a touchdown. You want pieces of this offense. Trey Tucker and Jack Besh. Tucker would be the priority, but Jacoby Myers easily can get traded. May not play again this week, just if they decide to hold him out through the trade deadline. But Tucker and Besh, I think, would benefit the most. You mentioned Brock Purdy. Jawan Jennings is the guy I think that would benefit the most with Purdy back, especially if Ayuk stays on IR. So Jennings, each of the last 2 games, 7 targets. He's outperforming Kendrick Bourne. And as I said on the Sunday night show, they just played the Falcons and the Texans. And so you look at some of the numbers and it may not be good. But when Purdy comes back, and I think Jennings gets his quarterback back, that's someone to keep an eye on there. The 3 Texans wide receivers I think are worth a look in Jalen Knoll, Jaden Higgins, and Xavier Hutchinson. Hutchinson now has 3 touchdowns in his last 4 games. He's the one I like the least, even though he's been productive. I wonder when Kirk comes back. So Higgins, I think, is tied to Nico. I think Knoll is tied to Kirk. Correct me if you think I'm wrong there.
No, I mean, it makes sense.
So Higgins, I think, would get Nico back this week because of the concussion. Hopefully he's through the protocol. But we don't know when Kirk will come back from the hamstring injury. I think Knoll's done enough that he's worth a look. The 2 Steelers guys are worth looking at. I'd put Calvin Austin ahead of Roman Wilson, but Wilson just scored a touchdown. But I think Austin's going to end up with more production long term. And then I have Malik Washington, Tyler Johnson, and Mac Hollins. Washington, who knows what he builds off this game. Finally productive. First time since Tyreek Hill's injury. Tyler Johnson, we know that Josh Reynolds is out. Garrett Wilson may not return after their bye week. And then Mac Hollins, could be his turn to get hot for the Patriots. Just had 7 catches for 70-some-odd yards, I believe, or 95 yards, for the Patriots.
Yeah, Calvin, I'll get to Ridley in a second, but Chris Godwin, 73% rostered, might be someone you want to stash. And I also think Calvin Ridley is someone to take a look at here because, unfortunately, it's not a great schedule just in the sense that he hasn't been practicing. So I can't sit here and say Ridley's going to play this week. Gets the Chargers and then a bye, and then the Texans, who are just so good against wide receivers. So that's not great. But
he could be a trade candidate, though.
He could. So whether it's DK or Ridley, whoever you want to apply this to, one thing I like, it's kind of, it really hasn't been said. The first 4 games of his career, Cam Ward averaged 150 passing yards per game. Within those games, he faced Denver, the Rams, and the Texans. The last 4 games, it's not translating to fantasy points for Ward because he's not throwing touchdowns, but he's averaging 250 passing yards a game. That's good for wide receivers. They can actually be startable if your quarterback's averaging 250 yards a game. That's a lot. All right, tight ends, Jamey?
Just before, we just got news that Judkins is day-to-day with his shoulder injury. So
Oh.
my guess at worst, he's probably missing week 10 at the most, would be the hope.
Okay.
The tight ends are interesting. So there's not a lot of great options for this week unless you're you keep mentioning the shallow league, so I'll bring up the shallow league guys. The two that I would look at would be Aranda Gaston if he's still available. Clearly, go pick him up. He's a must-start guy at this point. And then Theo Johnson. He's had 2 bad games in the last month, and that was both were against the Eagles. I think this week against the 49ers, you can trust him as a low-end starter. So take a look at both those guys. In terms of the week guys to add, Colston Loveland gets the Bengals, and it's now 10 touchdowns on the season and 8 in the last 4 games after Mason Taylor scored against them. So it's risky, but I think low-end starting option, Loveland's good. Just remember when you look at tight ends, we're getting Bowers back this week from injury and bye, McBride back from bye, Laporta back from bye. So just keep that in mind. And then I think you got to give Juwan Johnson some credit again. 10-point-something PPR points. He had 8 targets this week, 7 targets last week. Every game this season where he's had 7 or more targets, he's been 10 or more PPR points. So when they throw to him, he's productive. And so just looking at the matchup this week against the Rams is clearly not easy, but low-end starting option just in terms of the guys that are available. After him, it's the guys that are on a bye. I would look at Harold Fannin again. I would look at David Njoku again, just based on how this offense is going to operate. Mason Taylor is 30% rostered. I know the schedule is not easy coming off their bye week, but again, lack of targets in the passing game. And then a couple of trade options to consider, trade potential situations to consider. I was surprised when I saw this, but 2 different sites said that Mark Andrews could be on the move. Mm-hmm. So with Lamar Jackson coming back, look at Isaiah Likely. And the Titans, and again, I'll reference the same thing. Calvin Ridley could be moved. Tony Pollard could be moved. And Chiggo Okonkwo could be moved. They just traded one of their cornerbacks today to the Rams. So I think the fire sale is coming in Tennessee, which makes sense. Try to acquire as many draft picks as you can for guys that are most likely not part of your future. So if Chig is moved, Gunnar Helm just scored a touchdown, and Okonkwo has gotten about 5 or 6 targets almost on a week-to-week basis. So if that goes Helm's way, he could be somebody that I think you want to have on your team.
DSTs?
DSTs are fun this week. You got the Rams. They get the Saints. So take a look at them. You get the Lions against the Vikings. We know J.J. McCarthy starting again. They have some offensive line concerns. So the Lions look really good defensively last time we saw them against the Bucs. The Seahawks just been a really good defense. We don't know if Jaden Daniels will play. So we'll see what Marcus Mariota and the Commanders offense looks like on Monday night. But obviously the Seahawks DST has been fantastic. And then you get the Jaguars taking on Geno Smith. That's kind of the desperation play, but 16% rostered. If Jacksonville gets a typical Geno Smith performance, they may have some opportunities to turn the ball over. And we know at the beginning part of the season, they were very turnover friendly for a lot of opposing teams.
Yeah. Forgot to mention with the tight ends, Jamie mentioned Colston Loveland and Theo Johnson. You got to keep an eye on Cole Kmet and Daniel Bellinger, especially Kmet. And if the status of those guys could really boost those guys. I mean, if Kmet's out, Loveland would be pretty enticing against Cincinnati Bengals. All right. By the way, Juwan Johnson has the 3rd most targets at tight end. Isn't that crazy? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, look, first 3 games, it was 8+. Last 2 games, he's got 15 targets in the last 2 weeks. So,
yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you. We'll give you the big old waiver wire show tomorrow. Go more in depth on these guys, and we'll talk to you then on Fantasy Football Today. See you.